Howdy folks, welcome to another episode of Cedarcraft. So today I wanted to talk about some really nice tooling in the larger Cedar ecosystem, and we'll phrase it in terms of this example we've been working through, where we've seen, you can use Cedar with any language that has bindings. That includes Python. So we've been using that to work through a small, simple, minimal demo of a snippet of a larger hypothetical photo sharing app. And the past couple of weeks, we've seen how factoring out our policies and our entities makes the code a lot easier to manage, but also lets us use tools like the validator to ensure that a broad class of errors can't happen. So just to recap, here, we're reading the policies in from a separate file, which we'll look at here in a second. We're reading the entities in. This is sort of the authorization relevant state from the application that we need to make decisions about whether or not a given principal should be able to take a particular action on a given resource. And here we've got this little helper function that uses the all-important isAuthorized request to check to see if something's authorized, and we have a couple of simple checks. And we've already seen how to run this stuff, so we won't go back through that. But we saw that by factoring this out, it's sort of nice. Now we have our policies in all in one place. And in particular, what's nice is that if I make a mistake, like, I don't know, maybe I try to access a foo field when principals don't actually have foo fields. If I go and try to check that using the validator command, sure enough, it's going to complain. It says, oh, well, principals don't have a foo field. This doesn't make any sense. And so we've caught that mistake. And the way that works, if we go back and look at the command we ran, is that we passed in the schema. And so there's a couple different ways you can write schemas. I really like the human-readable syntax because it's sort of high-level intuitive, but there is also this JSON syntax. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but basically the schema is just describing the types of entities and what the actions are and which kinds of principles and resources each action can apply to. So this is great. We can check our policies. We can make sure that a bunch of errors aren't going to happen, that we haven't made any mistakes, which is critical for authorization. But it turns out that it's kind of tedious to have to switch back and forth between the terminal to run the validator and then back to your code to make fixes, etc. There's actually this really nice extension, though, for Cedar in the marketplace that we can run. So here we just installed it, and all of a sudden you'll see we get a nice logo here, and we got syntax highlighting. We're going to get auto formatting, all kinds of nice benefits. And in fact, actually, the VS Code extension will automatically run the validator for us. And it won't quite yet. And that's actually the trick I really wanted to highlight in the video today. So let's put that mistake we had back in. And we see that we didn't get any errors or anything. There's no red squiggles here. And that's because the VS Code extension actually only knows about the JSON format. So it doesn't know about this nice human-readable format. Now, to give you a comparison, or if you want to learn more about this, you can go to the Cedar language guide. And there's some stuff here under the schema heading about the JSON format. You can see this example. And you can compare that to the human-readable format. Now, personally, I find the human-readable format just a lot easier to work with, a lot easier to think about, edit, etc. But the VS Code extension doesn't currently use that when it won't take advantage of that to run the validator for you automatically. But here's a cool trick. We can actually use the command line tools to, let's find the command, translate the schema from the human-readable version to the JSON version. So here I'm just using the Cedar command line tools to translate the schema from human to JSON, and I'm going to save that in Cedar schema.json. The VS Code extension knows about JSON schemas, and in particular it looks for one that has this file name. And if we do this, now when we go back to our code, all of a sudden if we look at policies, if we save this, it will complain. So it knows that actually principals don't have a foo field. And that's because here, like I said, we have this Cedar schema.json. So this is the JSON version of this nice human-readable schema we just had. And by doing that translation now, the extension will pick it up and we'll use it to validate our policies. So now when we're editing our policies, we can get immediate feedback. We don't have to round trip from the terminal. If we had another mistake, like here if we had principal, well, principal doesn't have a viewer field either. We know that because this action is a view action, the resource must be a photo. That's what the schema said, right? It says the view action applies to users and photos, and we see that photos have viewers. So that's how all that checking works. One other thing I wanted to mention really briefly is that the VS Code extension will also provide additional highlighting for your entities. So if you dump your entity store as a JSON object, the VS Code extension will know how to use the Cedar schema.json to check that. So if we made a mistake, like, I don't know, here we've got this user Alice, and maybe we try to say that Alice has a parent that's a photo. And if we do that, let's just yank some of this down real quick. If we do that, if we say that, we have a photo and its ID is, I don't know, lake.jpg maybe, and get rid of that trailing comma, this complains because it's not possible for a user to have a photo as a parent type, right? That's not allowed by the schema. So you can also use this to validate that your entities respect the schema and you haven't screwed up somehow, made a type error with respect to your application types. And if you don't make any mistakes, well, then you get this nice validated message here at the top. So that's pretty cool. I find this is super helpful, and in practice, it's just a lot faster, a lot easier. It gives a lot more confidence using the VS Code extension. The one trick I think to highlight is this ability to translate from the human-readable schema over to the JSON so you can get the most out of this VS Code extension. But I think that's all we have for today. So thanks for joining, and I'll see you on the next Cedar Craft.